Old Number One came out in 1975, November of 1975, and at that point, Guy was well established as a songwriter for other people, but he had not made his own record yet. Jerry Jeff Walker had done 4 or 5 of his songs by that point, and he was, of course, an old friend from Texas, but other people were starting to be aware of him. He had grown up in Texas, and then he met his wife Susanna, and they lived in LA for a while, or Long Beach actually, and that's where the song, during that time is where the song LA Freeway came from. Then he got a publishing deal with someone in Nashville, and they suggested that he move to Nashville. And I think Mickey Newberry, an old friend from Texas, had also been pushing him to move to Nashville. Townes Van Zandt was here too, and when he and Susanna got married, Townes, I think, lived with them for like the first year of their marriage. So it was that close of a tie between the three of them, which Tamara Saviano has explored in her documentary about Guy and Townes and Susanna. But so Guy was sort of trying to get his career off the ground in Nashville, and people were paying attention. Everly Brothers cut one of his songs. Johnny Cash cut one of his songs. And so it was all rolling, and somebody finally decided we should actually get his own songs out there on a record. So Old Number One came out in 75. It was actually first recorded in 74 with a producer named Mike Lipskin from RCA. Lipskin was the one who signed Guy to RCA, and part of the condition of that was he really wanted to produce, and he said, part of the condition of me signing you is I'm going to produce the record. Guy was initially fine with that, but he didn't end up liking the results that much. It was the Lipskin was going for more of a Memphis sound with horns and sort of it not really a bad sound, and I've actually heard that unreleased record. And I don't think it was as bad as Guy made it out to be to the press and to friends at times, but he didn't think it reflected what he wanted to sound like as an artist, who he wanted to be as an artist. So I think he probably made the right call to redo it. He did that with a guy named Neil Wilburn, who he had recorded demos with here in Nashville, and he really liked the way the demos sounded. So they decided to recut Old Number One with Neil. The bigger thing that changed, the sound definitely changed some, but the bigger thing that changed is in that interim between the two sessions, Guy, I guess, had second thoughts about a bunch of the songs. So half of the songs recorded for the original 1974 version did not appear on the one that came out on the actual Old Number One that came out in 75. It wasn't that he didn't like those songs, because he ended up doing 4 or 5 of them on Texas Cookin', his second record, which came out in 76. But for whatever reason, and I think correctly in Guy's part, he wanted to elevate some songs that had not initially been included. And those were some pretty important songs, like She Ain't Going Nowhere, which Guy always said was his absolute favorite song of all the ones he wrote. And then Texas 1947, which was kind of a hit. It was a hit for Johnny Cash, but it's one of Guy's best known songs, I would say, still. So and Rita Ballou, which is the first song on the record, and is a really great introductory song to be your first song on your first record. That was not on the original one he had done in 74. So it was leading up to that point, a lot of steps to get to when this thing finally came out in 75. But when it did, it was a really good record, and one that we're still talking about and writing about 50 years later.
I think it's interesting that he had enough juice and influence to be able to record an album. Labels are notoriously worried about saving money and all of that. Do we know anything about how he convinced them?
I've been kind of surprised by that too, because it does seem like the thing that after this record had been recorded and he wanted to re-record it, the label would have just said, no, we're putting this out, but I don't know. I suspect he may have had some sort of clause in the contract to say that he had a right of refusal over that. But for whatever reason, either he was had the right to do so or the label let him do so. And the only catch was had to be done very cheaply the second time. But he didn't have, it wasn't like he wanted to redo it to go blow out the budget somewhere. He wanted something really simple, and he invited a lot of his friends in, and so you have all these sort of, stars or soon-to-be stars with cameos on the record, like Rodney Crowell and Steve Earle and Emmy Lou, who was already, better known at that point, but still early in her career. And
Reggie Young played guitar on that.
Yeah. That was another interesting thing, is that some of the people who were on the aborted session were also on the later one, including Reggie. I don't believe, I looked into this, but it doesn't look like it was any of the same stuff used over. So they just had him back for the next session. But that's, kind of how that all came together.
How do you not have Reggie Young on it?
Right, yeah. A big part of this book is, if it's good, a big reason for why it is the research done before I got involved by Tamara Saviano, who wrote Without Getting Killed or Caught, the 2015 definitive biography of Guy Clark. And then there's a writer from Dallas named Natalie Weiner, who did interviews with basically everybody she could find who was still alive, who participated in the sessions. Tamara asked Natalie to do that before I was involved, and then those interviews were given to me to be able to write the book from. So I did a few interviews myself, but mostly I was going from interviews that Tamara and Natalie had already done. But between them, this was like, close to 100 interviews probably. So lots of source material to dig from. With Desperados, it's all pretty much straight history from his life when he was a preteen, growing up in Monahans in West Texas, small town in West Texas, and there's a lot of talk about whether is it how literal is it, or how is the train a metaphor for the end of life coming, and you could probably make that case, but it's the character, the primary character in it, this guy who was a sort of a father figure to Guy Clark, but it was really his grandmother's boyfriend, I think. His name was Jack Prigg, I believe. He was a very influential figure on Guy's life, and that song just kind of captures what he felt about this man who was really influential in his life.
He would tell a story on stage about LA Freeway, about the landlord cutting down a tree in the backyard.
Yeah.
Was that true?
I believe it was. The tree being cut down, he definitely had sort of a contentious, he and Susanna had a contentious relationship with this landlord who I don't know if that was, I don't think that was so much the reason. Yeah, the way he tells it on stage, or would tell it on stage, is that was the reason they moved. It might have been like a straw that broke the camel's back, but by that point I think they already had the deal in Nashville, the publishing deal, and were already planning to make the trip, to make the big move back east.
I don't fault anybody for a stage story.
Yeah, it's
not a deposition,
right? And I do think the tree thing happened. I just think it was, he embellished a little bit on the motivations for leaving in that regard. That song is fascinating to me for a bunch of reasons. Partly because I didn't know until just recently that I moved to San Diego about 2 or 3 years ago, and I didn't know that San Diego has a significance in that song, because the night that Guy wrote the line, "If I could just get off of this LA freeway without getting killed or caught," I had always pictured of him, in a traffic jam on I-10 or 101 or something like that. Turns out he wrote it on the way back from playing in San Diego that night in a little trio he had with Skinny Dennis on bass. And it was at a place called the Heritage Coffee House in San Diego, which is very storied in the local culture there, largely because the doorman at the time that Guy was playing there was Tom Waits. And so Guy actually met, maybe even the night that he wrote LA Freeway, but he definitely met him at the San Diego, at the Heritage Coffee House in San Diego. So he and Susanna are driving back to their home in Long Beach after the gig, coming up I-5, and at some point they get in some crazy traffic jam at 2 a.m. and Guy was asleep in the back seat. He looks up, looks around, and he says, "If I could just get off of this LA freeway without getting killed or caught." Then he goes, "That's pretty good." And so he grabs different stories about this, but one of them is that he grabbed Susanna's eyebrow pencil and wrote on a burger sack in the back seat, wrote that line, and then just put it in his pocket, and before long, a whole song came out of it. So the funniest thing that I found from it was in talking with Lyle Lovett. He told me that when Guy and Lyle met in Nashville in the '80s, Guy was pivotal to Lyle getting his record deal. Guy had heard Lyle's songs, and he was talking them up to everybody. So when Lyle actually finally came up to Nashville and met Guy, Guy brought him out to his house out by the lake, and he let Lyle go through his lyric books, and Lyle was telling me that he was just so excited to be able to see this stuff, and he gets to the LA Freeway page, and he's like, "Hey Guy, what's this Long Beach Freeway?" and so Susanna and Guy lived in Long Beach, and apparently the first time he wrote it on some lyric piece of paper, he wrote Long Beach, and Guy just said LA sang better, which I think it does. So lots of little stories about that song that I really like.
I think there's a great lesson there. There's we need more songs written on hamburger bags with mascara than we do in apps on phones, and we'd probably be a lot better off. Let 'Em Roll. What do we know about any backstory on that song?
That was apparently loosely based on a guy that Guy knew. I don't know exactly how completely autobiographical it was. I think, like most things like this, it has some element of truth and some element of bringing the writer's license to it. But there was definitely a real person that song was based on. Yeah, for sure.
We all have different versions of what we think the quintessential Guy Clark songs are.
Yeah.
But stuff like Let It Roll or Randall Knife, to me, just really, I don't know, they hit just right.
It's good that you mentioned those two in close proximity, because Guy would say that he usually would not play them both at a show because it's basically the same picking pattern. Yeah. He just borrowed it again when he did Randall Knife. Now the song, it feels completely different because they have very different subject matter, but there's no denying that underneath it's the same little riff that he's using there. Yeah.
As he aged also, I think those songs like live became just so a whole other thing. As people age, things just become different, and the weight of those, to me personally, at a show were beautiful. Maybe they had the same weight when he was a younger man, but I think as he aged, it just became so much more real.
I would say that's true. Yeah, he definitely. Guy was one of those artists whose work, I think, took on more meaning as the years passed. Yeah. They've lasted really, really well. He was. I mean, they always kind of felt like old songs, even when he had just written them. But and maybe that's part of it. They're timeless in a way, and just the spirit of it. Even if the things he's referring to, like putting a nickel on the tracks in Texas 1947, is feels like something a kid would do a long time ago, but I don't know, maybe kids still do that today. Do kids still put nickels on the tracks?
I don't know. I know I did in 1987 in Texas, and wore the nickel for about 15 years around my neck.
Yeah. I did it with a penny myself, yeah.
I'm curious what the record label were thinking they had with Guy. Were they interested in him as a songwriter, so they just put an album out so they'd have part of the publishing? It'd be in the catalog, or did they really think that this guy might have a pop career, like a country career?
Realistically, I would say it was probably the former. It was probably more based on the connection to the publishing, because there was a lot of overlap between, I believe, the publishing company, RCA owned the publishing company, Sudbury Dunbar. So there was interconnectedness that made it beneficial to them to, from a publishing standpoint, to have those songs more out there. They definitely did not think that he was going to become a household name or anything, but I think they thought maybe it would do a little better than it did. He ended up doing 2 or maybe it was 3 records with RCA, and then moved on, and he was on a succession of labels over the years, but they didn't really expect. Well, a good comparison here is, and I talk about this in the book somewhat, is John Prine's debut album, which was released 4 years earlier, I think, 1971, and interestingly had a lot of the same people on it. And when you read stories, there's a really good 33 1/3 series book about that first John Prine album, written by Aaron Osman, and it's a really good examination of how Prine was this songwriter going in to work with these sort of Memphis studio guys, and it kind of wasn't a good fit, but they sort of learned to work with each other. And that ultimately, that was the record that had Angel from Montgomery on it, and it had Hello in there. It had Illegal Smile. It had Sam Stone. It had a lot of Prine's very best songs, and that one did catch on. It was kind of a long career kind of thing, but even right out of the box, he really got known for that record. I think maybe RCA thought the same thing might happen with Guy, but it for whatever reason, it wasn't quite the same lightning strike that it was with Prine.
Do we know how many copies they pressed of the first pressing?
That's a good question, and I'm going to have to ask Tamara that, because I don't think I know exactly how many.
I think sometimes that shows what their expectations might have been.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, some of those details were hard to get. Even like I had a hard time getting the exact release date. It was November 1975, but exactly which. Friday, or I guess it was maybe Tuesdays back then that they were released.
What studio was it recorded in?
It was at RCA Studio B, I believe, yeah.
So if people come to town and they go on the tour, that's where Guy recorded Old Number One.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that's where the re-recorded sessions that were done primarily were done. There was also a studio called American that I believe was Chips Moman had a studio called American Sound in Memphis, and then he opened one in Nashville that was just called American, I believe, and I think some of the stuff was also done there.
How was it received when it was released?
It was reviewed well. It didn't sell very well. It wasn't just a total bust, but it didn't really. I don't think it charted, because that was right at the time that Willie and Waylon were starting to have some of their biggest records like Red-Headed Stranger and Dreaming My Dreams, I think, for Waylon. It was right around that time, and I think it was part of the reason that Guy got the record deal was because people thought, hey, there's going to be more of this, as it always happens, people are chasing the next one that's just like the one that sold a bunch. But
that makes perfect sense that they would thought maybe this is another one of those guys.
Right.
Who knew why people would like Willie? If you're a guy in a suit behind a desk, I don't know. Let's do more of that and see what they like it.
Right. Yeah, there is a certain amount of sense to that. But because there was all of that happening, more outlets actually were paying attention. Rolling Stone wrote about it. Playboy wrote about it. And a lot of daily newspapers, that kind of thing. So there were outlets. Not everybody was writing about Guy Clark, but a lot of the ones that were sort of more forward thinking were paying attention. Yeah.
When did we start seeing this album as like a classic?
Oh, I think it was a gradual build. I don't think it was like some specific thing happened and suddenly everybody started looking back at old number one and realizing how great it was. It's just that Guy gradually built this career, and by the time he got to the 1990s with Dublin Blues, which was a really big record for him in the mid-90s, he got about as big as he could get in his world, really, I would say. And that was... people just at that point started looking back, but Dublin Blues came out in '95, so that would have been 20 years after old number one, and enough also just other people continuing to cover his songs, like the Highwaymen doing Desperados on one of their records, Cash and Waylon and Willie and Christopherson. So Guy's songs had just kept getting more and more out there in the world, and also he toured a lot. He worked. So all of that just gradually built up to the fact that that record, I think it became sort of mythical in a way, partly because it was his first record and because it had so many of his best songs on it. Verlin Thompson, who toured with Guy for decades, said that, when he would look back at the old number one record, he would be like, this is like our set list every night, so many years later, they were still playing all of those songs. So because they were still playing them, the record got more and more revered, I think.
So I interviewed Jim McGuire, who took the photos.
Oh, okay.
And he just told me about that day. I was just like, what do you remember about that day? Where are you? I thought it was in his studio. Mm-hmm. And he said that they went to an abandoned house over on West End that Guy knew something about, but they broke in and they took all of the photos in there. So I did not know that and did not know if that was out there or not.
It's not in Tamara's book and it's not in my book, so maybe that's not out there. It's possible Jim told that. I didn't interview Jim, but Tamara did, and she might have told him that, and that might have just been something that didn't quite make it into her book. But yeah, I mean, it's the thing I love about that about those photos is the photo with the denim shirt, and then especially on the back. He and Susanna are both wearing denim shirts too in front of the picture of the denim shirt. So I'm sure they had fun with the little in jokes and.
Yeah, he said that they brought the painting, Susanna's painting, with them.
Yeah. And
hung it up in the abandoned house. And there's a video on the channel. Some of you have seen that already, I'm sure, but I'll send it to you. And so I'm guessing you had quite a few personal interactions with Guy over the years, maybe.
Some, not a lot. I think I actually ended up having more of those with Townes than I did with Guy. But I had a few with Guy too, and I interviewed him at least a couple of times, I think. The one that I remember the most was 2001 here in Nashville. Guy was playing at Douglas Corner as part of the festival, and I'm not sure why, but I just thought, it wouldn't surprise me if Guy knew Champ. I didn't know that he had necessarily, but it's like I felt like I needed to let Guy know about Champ, and so I went over there early while there was sound check was going on, and I went and said hello to Guy, and I said, I just thought you should know about this Austin musician who was really, really great, who died today. And he looks at me and he says, Champ Hood was in my first band in Nashville. Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow. When he went out on tour for Old Number One, it was Champ Hood and Steve Earle were his band. So I was really glad that I was able to let him know about that.
The book has been out since November. Mm-hmm. And what's the name of it?
It's called Old Number One at 50, A History of Guy Clark's First Album.